I think I'm going to wait a few minutes because I know that there are some other people who plan on showing up. But
I want to hear Chacham Leah's Chiddush. I want to hear it all.
Well, I think she has a few things that she'd like to say. And I know that Channing has a few things that he would like to say and discuss about Serach Bat Asher, who shows up in this parsha, right? Unnamed, but in a footnote, yes. And yeah, I think it's kind of a neat little parsha. There is something I was hoping that Channing would be here too, because I noticed something that not last week, but the week before, he had pointed out about the description of Joseph's form. And so I found another reference to that today. So I was hoping that he would be here too.
It's so early.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is early.
Can you give a reminder?
Yeah. Oh, and I need to make Leah co-host, so I don't know. So, yeah. So for those, since we're not doing Torah right now, so for those who don't know, I said Sylvester Sameach, which meant Sameach is to have a happy. So I was saying have a happy Sylvester. Well, what does that mean? That means that's kind of weird, right? We don't usually say happy Sylvester on this night. We say happy New Year's. But in Israel, they say happy Sylvester. And it's because, of course, the Jewish people didn't follow the Gregorian calendar. And I believe Pope Sylvester in the 1500s kind of made it mandatory. And so since Jews celebrate New Year at Rosh Hashanah, they, in their own language, called this day Sylvester's Day. Yep. And that's my understanding. So.
And some people call it Tweety's Day, but it's okay.
All right. Well, let's see. We need to do the bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'zivanu. Oh my gosh, I'm slipping. Oh my god. Thank you.
Okay. It happens.
I'm having a small stroke.
That's all right. That's okay.
Oh my goodness. So, all right. Well, let's yes, he did. Yes, right. Someone put in the comments that he made a decree against the Jews in Jerusalem. Yes, there is discussion about whether or not Sylvester, the Pope, was anti-Semitic, and lots of feelings about that. So yes, you're absolutely right. So this week's Parsha is Vayigash. And can you tell us what Vayigash means, Rabbi McLashley?
I'm trying to think. Hargasha means to feel, like a regish. Hargasha means to feel or have a feeling.
Yeah, to approach.
I got he approached.
He approached.
He approached,
which is how the Parsha starts off. Then Judah approached him and said, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, it's like to draw close. I think we once...
To draw close, yeah.
To draw close.
It's related to the concept, I think, of Hargasha, because when you feel something, you have to draw close to it to touch it.
Yeah. And stand heart to heart. So in this Parsha, it's too bad, I guess, that that Channing is not here yet. Because I would start in right away about that. But this Parsha is about Joseph and the Pharaoh, right? And Joseph then is met up in this Parsha with his brothers. His brothers are brought, come to Egypt, and Joseph, they don't recognize him, but Joseph welcomes them, and he sends them back with some food, and they come back and sends them back again with some food. And on the third time, the brothers come, and he says, "Hey, I'm your brother. You didn't recognize me." Oh, there we go. You didn't recognize me. And in this, then he reveals that he's alive. They all thought he was dead, right? And so they carry the news back to Joseph's father, Jacob, who's very elderly and frail. And they break the news to him in a very special way, which we'll talk about tonight. And some interesting, this is the story that happens during tonight's Parsha. Now that Channing has popped in and joined us, I want to point out that in the Parsha, Channing, remember what? Not last week, but the week before that, you had talked about a specific phrase. Let me see if I can pin Channing. There you go. Do you remember that you talked about a specific phrase, Channing, about shapely in form?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm actually, sorry, I'm late. I'm actually on my iPad. My notes are on my laptop, which I'm booting up now. But it was the same exact words they used to describe Leah, Rachel, and Sarah, and but the masculine forms of those words.
Yes.
Which were not used to explain anyone else of the male presenting
Yes,
genders.
that's true. But I will say, in reading the last week's Parsha and this week, I found it again. And you know where it is?
Where?
In the description of the fat cows of Pharaoh's dream that he tells to Joseph.
Interesting.
And they call so everybody here, Pharaoh has this dream, right? And there are these, fat cows, and they are described in the same terms.
Shapely and beautiful.
As shapely and beautiful, yes, cows. And actually, that kind of changes a lot of some of the meanings that might be behind that not that phrase, but the romantic interpretation, the dream interpretation. And I'm going to tell you just a quick little bit about it, which is that I believe that they describe those fat cows that get eaten up by 7 other ugly, scrawny cows they describe as like grazing, by the swamp or something like this. And Rashi calls it, that word is actually unknown. And Rashi decides in some of his commentary that word must mean like swamp, like swampy marsh.
So it's a hepax legomonia.
Right. But there's an earlier commentator, rabbi, who does not agree and says that the word means something else. It means brothers. And
thank you. Best wishes.
let me see. Can you
Can you mute all?
Yeah. Let's see.
Sorry, that was me. They're all
Okay.
yes.
No worries.
Yeah.
So, and that word actually, which is an unknown word, means brothers. And and the word preceding that word, that swampy word, actually has two meanings. And one is when it's used in conjunction with animals grazing. So they're grazing at the swamp, is how Rashi decides. But now you're muted, Channing. So
where's this word?
when they're describing the cows.
Okay, and
Okay.
in the current parsha or last week's?
It's in last week's when they're talking about the animals.
Brothers.
And I'm only bringing this up because the week before that we talked about this whole shapely and form thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now we're into etymology, which is kind of a favorite subject of yours and mine. I think.
And Azarias.
Yeah. and so when the word is actually not applied to animals but applied to humans, it means shepherding. So this other other interpretation prior to Rashi was that they were the cows that were shapely in form were shepherding their brothers. And this idea triggers an insight by Joseph, who reinterprets the dream in the context of his own life, that the shapely cows get eaten up by the skinny brothers, and so does Joseph. Joseph gets thrown out by the brothers, and so there's this rabbi makes an argument that it was a parallel that Joseph picked up on, and this is what allows him to interpret the dream for Pharaoh and tell him the right thing. So I just wanted to point out that shapely is also, and when that rabbi pointed it out, he also points out, exactly as you do, that those words are specifically only used to describe Joseph and his mother, Rachel, actually.
Yes. The babe.
Yeah, exactly. So the beautiful and shapely cows represent Joseph and maybe his mom or whatever. But then the question becomes, why are there 7 and not 2? And there are explanations for that. And I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now. And it has to do with the 70 years of goodness that Pharaoh was going to have, and then followed by 7 years, of famine.
And the 7 days of creation.
Yeah,
on and on and on and on and on.
But all of those, I just wanted to share with you that little tidbit around those words that you had highlighted before. So, So there you go. So welcome. I see so many people are joining us for Sylvester Sameach. We have Rob Aaron and Rabbi Danino and new faces. I see even new people who haven't been here before. So it's wonderful to see you all, and welcome. We already did the blessing to study Torah. So if you want to do that yourself, you can do that quietly. And Rabbi McGlashley has explained to us the title of Vayigash, and I talked a little bit about what the Parsha was about. I know that Leah has some things to say, and you have some things to say, and I don't want to take up. I need to shut up more, is what I've been told. Let everybody else speak. So have at it. Do you want to go after
Leah?
Leah.
Well, the main thing I wanted to point out in this Parsha is that,
Let me pull you up here.
well, I'm not gonna get on camera.
That's okay. You don't have to.
So we know that in this Parsha, Jacob finds out that Joseph is alive and doing quite well in Egypt. But what they don't.
Can everyone hear that? Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
But if you look at this little footnote on 45, 25 through 28, they don't mention it in the text, but in this footnote, they say that they were concerned that this announcement might shock Jacob. So his granddaughter, Sarah, daughter of Asher, was sent to prepare him for it. And she played her harp and sang gently that Joseph was still alive and that he was ruler of Egypt. And then Jacob's sadness evaporated and he blessed her. And as a result, the famine is lifted. And then it mentions she is still active centuries later and enters the Garden of Eden alive.
Yeah.
So she's our girl.
Does everybody understand what happened here? Jacob's an old man. He's been thinking that his son is dead for all this time. All of a sudden, it turns out his son is alive. They don't want to shock him, so they have this young, nice woman sing a song and play the harp. And this young woman turns out to be a very famous character in Jewish tradition, who is, I think, unnamed in the Torah. I don't think
she's named. She is named. One of the few women who are actually named.
Yes. Yes.
In the long list of all the daughters and then the sons and grandsons, it does mention Sarah Bat Asher as the adopted granddaughter.
Yes.
And so this is, a monumentous occasion to actually have a woman named. And not only here, but numerous occasions, she is named hundreds of years apart.
That's right. She is. And why is she named hundreds of years apart? For those who don't know, she is considered to be the embodiment of the children of Israel's memory, their memory of history. She pops up all the time. And I wrote a little paper on her, which I'm happy to share some of the details about. But she is a very important person in Jewish tradition. The Mizrahi Jews definitely, they used her name a lot on their amulets, against the evil eye, because Serach Bat Asher, like Miriam and like Joseph, all have power over the evil eye. And usually the amulets you see by the Mizrahi Jews from Central Asia and Persia in particular, they usually begin with Psalms 16 verse 8, and that's I shall keep my eyes always on the Lord, Lord, and that's, I think, part of the Shviti. Oh no, that's 67. Sorry. And they typically mention, if it's the amulet is against the evil eye, Serach Bat Asher, and sometimes Joseph too. So you can find out a little bit more about her, but she's a master of playing the harp, she's often pictured with the harp. And this is why she is the one who's chosen to break the news in a song-like, fashion there for Jacob. So she's a master of playing the harp, and she is also, as I think Channing stated, one of the few, or maybe Leah stated, one of the few people who ascends to the afterlife or heaven or whatever you want to call it without dying.
Yeah, she's one of the Jewish immortals.
Yes.
There's either 3, 7, or 9, depending on your source.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Sarah, she's the one, I believe, who leads Moses to the spot in the Nile River to say that's the spot where Joseph is buried, because the Egyptians they essentially turned Joseph himself into a human amulet, right? They want to make the Nile fertile. And so they take the bones of Joseph and they put it in a metal tube. Okay, that's a casket or a sarcophagus or a metal tube, right? Okay, and they throw him into the Nile on purpose, both to hide him and to fertilize, give the power to the Nile. And so Serach Bat Asher, essentially divine, they're like running to get out, right? Like Moses has been given the okay to get out of there. So they're everybody's gathering up to get out of Egypt, and they're like, wait, we can't leave without Joseph. We gotta get Joseph. But
there was the promise.
Yeah.
There was a promise made that you couldn't leave, without Joseph. He had to go with you. And no one knew where he was buried or hidden except for Sarah Bat Asher, because she was there when he was buried.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there is also some mention that some people believe she might actually be the witch of Endor.
Yes, that's right too.
One other thing I would point out is that that kind of relates to Labriut. That relates to what today is that Yaakov, he was shown the garment of Yosef, the bloodied garment. He had a raya that Yosef was in the Yenavel, no more. Goodbye, Yosef. The last halacha that Yaakov and Yosef learned together was the Egla Arufa, the broken calf, the broken neck. Anyway, that's not important, but they learned the last halacha they learned together was the Egla Arufa. And after that, Yosef was gone, dead. But it says Yaakov never was able to achieve nachama, consolation. He was inconsolable. That's the word I'm looking for. He was inconsolable.
Yeah.
Because some part of him knew that Yosef was still alive. Even before even before he was told, some part of him, in other words, because he was inconsolable, some part of him knew that Yosef was not not dead on some intuitive level. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is because and there's a Gemara, Baba Metzia, that deals with if an object is lost, when do you have the obligation to return that object to the owner? It's called the mitzvah of Hashavas Ha'aveda, returning a lost item. Yosef was lost to Yaakov. I mean, common sense said, hey, here's his bloody garment. He was thrown into a pit. He was rent asunder by a wild animal. He's gone. He's dead. I mean, Yit Gadal v'Yit Gadash. Let's gay weiter. But he could not get consolation. Now, this Gemara, the Gemara, the part of the Talmud that deals with returning a lost object, very interesting. It starts Elu Metzia Shalova Elu Chayav Lahachris. That if you find something, these you can keep, and these you're obligated to try to find the owner. And it deals with what items for example, if something has what they call a siman nicker, an identifiable mark. Okay, I lose my cap, but it has, I stand with Israel on it. That's a siman nicker. That's an identifiable mark.
Well, yeah, it has your mom used to write your name in your underwear.
Right, and if it has my name on the inside, that's another siman nicker. If a person's a Talmud Chacham, a wise person, it says you can rely on Tefiyat Ayin. They can recognize what's there, but I don't want to digress. The point is that the issue of when you have the mitzvah to return an item to the owner seems to rest on the concept of Yiyush. If the Yiyush means to give up, Messiah is someone who relinquishes hope of finding something. The Gemara gives the example like you have a sack of coins. You're at sea on a ship. It falls overboard. It's called avudami kaladim. It's lost to everyone. There's no hope. You can't dive to the bottom of the ocean and retrieve it. So you can pretty much assume that whoever lost it is going to say there's no hope of recovering it. He might feel the pain of the loss for a while, but the initial, oh my God.
Logically,
but he's going to come to terms with it
himself.
eventually. Right. Now, the thing of this is, with Yaakov, he wasn't able to come to terms with it. He didn't have nechama. And I came up with this. I don't know if it's a chiddush or whatever, but I mentioned it when I was in yeshiva, that this is the thing with the Beit HaMikdash, with the temple. We as Jews every year get together for Tisha B'Av, and we recite keynote, and we do Eicha, and we're mourning for a temple that was lost a millennium ago. I know you say, hey, it's been gone for a long time. You should, you get over it.
Get over it, right? You should.
Right.
No,
Hey,
they can remember.
come on, it's gone. It ain't coming back. But there's some part in every Jewish neshama that realizes the Beit HaMikdash really isn't gone. That we're going, it may not be nidla, it might not be revealed right now, it may not be visible right now, but some part of it knows that it's not lost for all time. And I pointed out that the Ribono Shel Olam, the Almighty, has an obligation to follow his own mitzvah. And as long as we're not giving up on the Beit HaMikdash, he has the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, returning that which is lost. So it kind of ties in with the story of Yaakov, who couldn't get nechama because he knew Yosef wasn't irretrievably lost. Same thing with every Jew, that we know that the Beit HaMikdash is not irretrievably lost, so Hashem has to return it to us. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Azaria, you have something to? You have your hand up?
Yeah. So you mentioned when Yaakov's presented with this coat as a costume or something. That's very interesting to me is that all three of the core garments are mentioned at that point. You have the bloody outerwear of Yosef, and then Yaakov tears his tunic, his inner garment, and then he girds his loins. So his underwear basically is girded with sackcloth. So all three of the core garments are at play in that grief in that moment.
Good one.
And Kriya is exactly what we do when we're mourning, Kriya, tearing the garment. So.
Oh, yeah, that's true too. Yeah. Well, so someone asked a little bit ago. They wanted to know who else were the other 9 people who were immortal, and they wanted to know, did Sarah live in Egypt during slavery? So yes, she's there, right? She's there with Joseph all the way, with Jacob, right? And all the way through, through finding him along for the ride with Moses, right? And then there are stories of her popping up, and this is why she's, quote, immortal and essentially the collective Jewish memory. There are stories of her even popping up around 200 CE, okay? And she's reportedly living in the north of Israel, near Galilee, which happens to be under Roman occupation. And the second temple is destroyed, and they're sitting around. There's a famous rabbi, Yohanan, and he's pontificating, talking about what the waters looked like when Moses, in the Red, God parts the Red Sea for Moses. I don't want to say Moses parted the sea. Everyone says Moses parted the sea, but Moses didn't part the sea. That's where we get the aggravation from. God parted the sea, through Moses. Okay, so it was God's power. Anyway, he's pontificating. This rabbi is talking about it. He's teaching the other boys at the yeshiva, and what do you know? Sarah Bat Asher pokes her head in and corrects him and says, that the water actually, when they were looking at it, looked like lighted windows, and she was there. She should know. So she interrupts them in their studies, and she corrects people every now and again. Yeah, there was reports of her at 500 BC, CE, and continuing along. So immortal. And who are the other people? Well, Moses doesn't. I'm not sure if Moses is considered to be one of those people, because he actually doesn't really. I think the term for him that's used for him is that he's just it's the kiss of God. So I don't think that. But Elijah is certainly one who ascends. I think Enoch, who becomes Metatron, is one who may be in that category. Can you think of anyone else? Anyone?
Eliyahu Hanavi, but I mean, Henoch not only became the Metatron, he was referred to as the lesser Yud Kei Vav Kei.
Yeah.
Whatever that means, I have no clue, but that's the way he's referred to.
Yes, you said that Moses very much died. That's the way the Torah ends. Right. It's the last eight verses is the narration of his passing. But yeah, I know that there's some some people who believe otherwise. What do you want? There's variation within Jewish tradition. So that's why there's 3, 6, or 9, depending on.
Well, Jewish immortals we're talking about?
The number of immortals, I think it's Serach Bat Asher, right? It's
Sarah Asher, Eliyahu Hanavi, Henoch. We already mentioned Henoch.
Yeah.
Barry Manilow?
Well, he's still living, but he could be undead.
As far as my wife's concerned.
Yeah.
There's also a what is it? A Serach Haggadah supplement for Passover that I'm just about to put the link for it in the for the PDF in the chat here, because it's pretty good.
She's a fascinating character, and I urge everybody here to try to do a deep dive into her, because everybody here probably knows stories: Moses, Abraham, Jacob, this one, that one. Okay, all right, we but like Serach Bat Asher is kind of obscure and super cool, like super.
He's
cool.
also a werewolf hunter.
Yes, a werewolf hunter. Yes, that's right. I think I wrote about that too, right, Sarah? She's yes, that's about yeah.
Is that relating to Binyamin? Because Binyamin was considered.
It is.
Yeah, Binyamin. Yeah, okay, fine. Binyamin. All right, very good. Well, she was the first werewolf hunter. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I'll send you some of that. I think it might be in the blog. It's either in the werewolf blog or it's in the Serach Bat Asher blog. I think it's in the Serach.
But they mention a lot about it. It's on the JewishMonsterHunting.com.
Oh yeah. So, but she's like, and the idea of having a collective long-term memory
right back.
is really wonderful, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there was another point I think that you wanted to make, Leah, which is there's another character who is briefly mentioned, which yeah.
One of Leah's daughters is Jochebed, which is Moses' mother.
Right. One of her. Say it again. One of
Leah's
Leah's
daughters is Jochebed, which is Moses' mother.
Yeah. So she's in here in this part.
I didn't realize she was just the grandmother of Moses.
Yeah. Right.
That's kind of a big deal.
Pretty good. So. Any other questions, points anybody wants to bring out on this lovely holiday?
Well, we can take a look at the big picture.
Yeah, you want to go for it, Rob? All right, I wait for.
How about we take a look at the story? Okay, so we have the reunification. What's interesting about the Parsha is I didn't hear what Rabbi McGlashkley said about Yehuda approaching Yosef, because Vayigash means to approach.
Yeah.
And there's like two themes that are two subplots that are in the Parsha. So there's, what are we really approaching here? Like Yehuda is approaching Yosef, but what are we collectively approaching here? And why does the Torah bring us, why is the story going to Egypt? It seems like this is a detour from the whole promise, right? So the promise was to go to Eretz Yisrael. Then Abraham had the vision that the Jews would be in slavery. So like the ultimate promise is, so there's a process. So why not just get to the end, right? Like if God made a promise to make to Abraham to make the Jews a great people, why not just get there? Why does there have to be this convoluted route where there's brothers versus brothers? There's and it's brothers, literally, it's generation of brothers versus brothers. We have it over and over again.
We ask that question all the time. Like, why does it have to be so complicated? Why does God, and like, why did the flood? Remember, we talked about there was a whole process that happened with the way the universe, the whole thing was created, right? It's like why, you can say like, why do we have cells and blood cells and spleens and lungs? Why didn't God just make us like animated like a piece of paper, like one large just blob that,
but you're going in a different direction. That I was talking more about life events, like how our lives unfold. I mean, the Torah is kind of explaining that there's a process.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's never straightforward. That's all.
Right. And there are the vicissitudes of life that are reflected in the Torah, and at every step of the way, there will be someone who's close to you who will be against you, who you least expect. I mean, that's one thing. But what we see here is there's a lot of time spent talking about Paro and Yosef's relationship with Paro, and Paro developing a relationship with Yaakov. And so there's, I think, something that can be learned from this. Yosef, all the Avot have a tag to them. They have like a moniker. It's Avram Avinu, Avram our father, and then Yitzchak. What's Yitzchak's? Avram Miglashki?
Oh, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov.
No, but Avram Avinu, Yitzchak.
Yeah, what's their honorific?
Yeah, their honorific.
We call Yosef a tzaddik.
Yosef Hatzadik. That's
tzaddik.
Right. Yeah. So that's what I want to get to. But Yosef Hatzadik. So why Yosef Hatzadik? And in my opinion, Yosef Hatzadik. I mean, what's so special about Yosef as compared to the other Avot? I mean, he was abandoned by his brothers, sold as a slave. He went to jail. He's the first mention of jail in the Torah is with Yosef. He gets out of jail. He becomes viceroy of Egypt. So he goes from the bottom all the way to the top. But what makes him a tzaddik? And I think what makes him a tzaddik is the fact that he remained a Jew in the midst of all the Egyptians. He was the only Jew who was there, and he kept kosher. He ate separately from them. And when he reveals himself to Binyamin, what does he do? He shows him that he's circumcised. He said, look, I'm circumcised and I'm speaking Hebrew to you. So the fact that he was speaking Hebrew, the fact that he maintained his Judaism throughout, being surrounded, being the only one, and rising above. So he integrated himself. So and what it's telling us is we as Jews, those of us who identify as Jews, have the power, not only the power, but it's to be a tzaddik, is to be able to maintain who you are in the world around you, which is unlike you, which does not share the same traditions, but not just to maintain your identity, but to integrate, to weave yourself in there, to be part of the system, if you can be part of the system, to help others. And this is why I think Paro is giving him such honor. There's such honor and such respect when a Jew steps out of their comfort zone and goes into the world and integrates themselves in the world, in the non-Jewish world. So they're not just in the shtetl. They leave the shtetl and they go out and they do something with the world and they maintain their identity. They don't lose it. And this is what makes him, in my opinion, a tzaddik. And this is what we see, the kavod, the honor that that Paro, who's the king of Egypt, gives to the entire family is because of this. So that's
what you're saying there, that what you just said encapsulates the difference between the righteous of the nations and the Jewish people. Because by Noach, the difference between Noach and Abraham. Noach, b'makom she'ein anashim hishtadel liyot ish, the place when no one is behaving like a mensch or doing what they're supposed to do, step up and do. Noach did that. Noach did that, but he didn't integrate. He wasn't proactive. He didn't take it out into the world and sort of like weave himself into the fabric of the surrounding society. Avram, on the other hand, did. He was actively involved in kiruv and bringing people to belief in one God and hachnasas orcham. And you see these traits exemplified, reaching their culmination, as it were, in Yosef HaTzadik. So what you just touched on, I'm just sort of elaborating on what you just said.
Yeah, and it's the ability to integrate yourself without sacrificing being a Jew, without sacrificing that.
Yeah, I mean, doesn't that apply to Queen Esther as well? I mean, you know, she's taken up and she has to be essentially a crypto Jew, right? In hiding, even though she's the queen, and eats rice.
I very much figured out she was Jewish, though.
Yeah. You know, eating
as
rice
soon as
and
he
beans.
started asking for his credit cards, I mean, it was a devil.
So well, all right. So there is a question here that is I'm going to direct to Rabbi McLashley, who is our resident expert in kashrut. Someone asked, "Wait, I thought Moses founded kashrut. Is that wrong?"
Well, it's a good question, but what they say is, and look, let me preface this by saying you have to understand Avram Avinu, it says kept kosher, including the laws concerning teruvas chalav basar, mixing meat and milk, or the isser of mixing meat and milk. Now, the thing is that when he was hachnasas orchem, when he received the guests of the malachim, the angels, that he didn't know they were angels, whatever, but he received it. It says that he brought them. He brought the meat and milk, right? So you're saying, well, how did this happen? And the rabbis come along and explain, oh, first he served the milk, and then after they had the milk, they waited a period of time, then they served the meat. So in other words, he was still observing the laws of kashrut before the Torah was given. That he intuitively understood the laws of kashrut. He intuitively understood the mitzvot by just observing, by observing nature. In other words, the Torah, the entire universe is just a manifestation. It says that the Torah preceded creation, preceded Maaseh Bereshit, preceded creation, so that the Torah, it says that Hashem looked in the Torah and basically created the universe. It's kind of like the code, the DNA of the universe, the blueprint. So Avram Avinu, on his level, was able to look at the universe and basically learn Torah by just observing Teva, observing nature. So the fact.
Azaria, I don't want to speak for them, but maybe they can unmute themselves. But they say that they're thinking that they might remember a case.
Yeah, that would be the angels that we got to, but also like it never occurred to me as a problem, like because we didn't have that instruction at that point.
In the very
Well, you know what? She's got a good
I'm
point.
not saying the
By
Torah didn't
Shavuot-
exist. I'm
by
just saying that we
Shavuot,
didn't
the
have it
reason we have
explicitly.
dairy on Shavuot is because we don't. Because the idea is we hadn't received the laws yet, so that's why we have dairy, milchik on Shavuot, chalabi. Because the bottom line is we haven't received the laws yet. Abram was able to intuitively understand that. The way I get it is that basically they were codified. They were the code or the halachas were transmitted to Moshe at Har Sinai, but Avram Avinu intuitively understood these before Zaman Matan Torah.
So he was just essentially, you're saying like he decided that he was going to be a vegetarian or a pescatarian or whatever before that was a thing.
He was able to understand the laws of the Torah because the actual physical Torah is not the Torah. The physical Torah is just a manifestation in the physical form of the, like, I don't know, sheet music is not really music, right? It's just symbols.
Mm.
You read it and okay, you know what string to pluck or whatever. The actual physical Torah is like basically Hashem sheet music.
Yeah.
That's the best I can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to comment on Duffy's. He was kosher before it was cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's the original hipster.
Yes.
Right.
Well, again, also Jews are the original hipsters. I mean, we were into it way before anyone else. Before Hashem sold out and had kids. We like the original book.
Before it sold out at a son.
I mean,
that's very funny.
But also just to pull out a little bit, because later on in 45 where he actually has his coming out story, and actually reveals himself to be their youngest brother, and they're like apologizing and throwing themselves at him, and he says, no, it was all meant to be. This is part of the grand scheme of things, and I have no regrets, because if you did not throw me to sell me into slavery, I would not be able to save the Jews.
Yeah, he says the reason I'm here able to save you is because you did these things. You tossed me into the pit.
I do want to flag, though, that he saves them, but at the end of the Parsha, we have him setting them up for damnation by demanding all of the Egyptians' body and their soil, and making them serfs of Pharaoh, which his family is not, which is the seeds of resentment that leads to us being enslaved. If he just stopped at the silver and the cattle, we could have avoided everything that comes after.
Yeah.
So naming that our rescues can sometimes be damnations and that we need to pay attention to them, I think is important.
And also, just to point out archaeologically, during this time of supposedly when this story is going on, the Egyptians already had ancient Egyptian scholars and archaeologists. Because that's how long the Egyptian dynasty actually has been. That even 3,000 years ago, they had people who were studying ancient Egyptian history that was already a couple of thousand years old.
Yeah, someone posed a question earlier. Do you think Joseph, while he was, hanging out with the Egyptians, learned anything from them and any knowledge? And the answer is, I should hope so. I should hope everybody should be able to look around them and see the wise people of the world and learn from them. And that includes the animals and the trees. Okay. Wisdom comes from lots of places, and its validity is not necessarily determined by the source.
There is a group called Non-Human Intelligences, and they're like a school, and basically it's based upon learning from nature and animals. I think you can Google non-human pedagogy or non-human intelligence school or something like that. And it's there are more than one forms of knowledge.
I would not think that anybody would travel to Egypt and look the other way while the entire time that they're there, right?
No.
No, how would
you learn from everyone. So
the,
I'm
the
sure
whole,
you learn.
the whole point is he integrated himself into Egyptian society and rose up within it. So he had to have spoken the language. He had to have rub shoulders with Paro. I mean, how do you get that high up in Egypt without learning a thing or two and being able to adapt yourself or adapt rather into the culture. You got to be able to have a drink with folks outside the shtetl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. You have to be able to sit down and even with people who think differently than you. That's the whole. I mean, we have I don't know 17 Jews that right here or people who are attending, which means we at least have 38, 39 opinions, on the same matter. So I think that's a-okay. And then there was a question I think someone had about victim blaming, and I didn't quite understand that. So if they want to elaborate, they're free to unmute themselves and go ahead.
Hi, that was me.
Yeah. Hi, you.
I could turn on my camera.
You don't have to.
Okay. Anyway, I think somebody, I don't remember who it was, but I think somebody just said like there's something that Joseph did while he was in charge, like he had like too high of taxes or something, and like that created resentment that led to the enslavement. And if he just stopped earlier, then that wouldn't have happened. I remember who said that here.
Yeah, it's the last part of our Parsha.
Yeah, so in the last part of the Parsha it says that, but remember, I don't know, I think Yosef is doing that on behalf of Paro. So it's not like Yosef is benefiting from it. Yosef and his brothers get the land of Goshen, right?
Yes.
So they get some nice fertile land, but they don't get the land that was purchased by the Egyptian government. So that would have been the whole land of Egypt. I understand what you're saying, but Yosef was just being a savvy business person on behalf of Paro. So the kavod, the honor that Paro showed Yosef was like, wow, you gave me all this wealth, you helped me get there. Without you, I mean, Paro understood, without Yosef, he wouldn't have had anything. There would have been a famine in the land, everyone would have starved, it would just be decimated. And Yosef saved the entire nation of Egypt for Paro. And then created wealth
but
for
he
him.
saved it for Paro, but he also set up he takes free people and renders them serfs. Like he could have advised Pharaoh, like, hey, actually, if we stop, after we've collected all the silver, after we've collected all the cattle, and we still leave people their dignity and their land, and we keep them fed, with an understanding that taxes will come at, this rate later, like that is a different experience than being a serf who is bound to the land, who can't move at all, who has no agency and no independence.
Serfs are Egyptian?
And Pharaoh's getting the profit. I'm not contesting that, but I'm saying that Yosef didn't advise Pharaoh that like he was going too far.
Okay.
And he participate in this rendering of the free Egyptian people to serfs.
Okay, I mean, I guess
like a very prominent precursor to us becoming slaves, because our people were free people in Goshen. Like that's gonna build resentment. And I'm not saying that those of our people who were slaves are, to blame for their slavery. I'm saying one person, Yosef, in this position of power, acted the powerful business person in a dickish way.
Right. I mean, I feel like that speaks to like Jewish diasporic life just throughout the ages. I mean, like in medieval Europe, the Gentile lords would have the Jews be all the money lenders or tax collectors or what have you. And then when the poor Gentiles were, you know, furious because how they're being mistreated, they just blamed the Jews instead of, you know, blaming the non-Jewish lords that were in charge of all of them. So it's like a similar.
Yeah, and like there's a difference between the resentment being misdirected and the resentment not being valid. Like if we say that that the Egyptians' hatred and ignorance came from a vacuum, we are being fairly racist towards the ancient Egyptians. But if we say like, hey, this was misdirected, you know, we can start addressing okay, what are the needs here that need to be met, and start looking for ways to mend that injury. You know, and I'm drawing this forward to parallels because, you know, the dynamics of anti-Semitism obviously didn't stop when we escaped Egypt. You know, it's about how do we restore that dignity and that, you know, to basic needs being met.
And that is the age-old tikkun olam.
And the whole situation of money lending becomes very, very difficult if you're just dealing with other Jews, because in Israel they have to circumvent these issues. You have the laws of rebus, which is charging.
Yeah.
You can't be a pressing creditor, which means that if someone says, hey, I don't have the money now, you can't be a pressing creditor. So there's all sorts of things in halacha, which makes it very, very difficult.
Yeah, problematic.
Yeah, very problematic if you're just dealing with other Jews. That being said, you have to treat non-Jews compassionately in these issues, but you don't have as many restrictions as you have when you're dealing with another Jew. You don't have as many restrictions. You know, you can't charge unreasonable interest, but of course, you're in the money lending business. You have to make a living, and that's what you do for a living. So, you know. But if you're dealing with with someone else who's Jewish, you can't charge rebus, you can't charge interest. In Israel, they have the banking system has this whole convoluted logic where they circumvent that. Well, I'm just being honest, and to me, it just seems like an end-run play around. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you have a lot of that. I mean, come on, we're Jews, we lawyer our way into heaven. Let's be honest, okay?
I just want to point out that it's the Egyptians who go to Yosef asking for Yosef's help. And when we take a look at the language in the Parsha, they're going to him and saying, when we have no money. Since the money and the herds of animals have been depleted into the hands of our master, there's nothing left to our master but our bodies and our farmland. Why should we die before your eyes and leave the farmland desolate? Buy us and our farmland in exchange for food, and let us and our land become subjugated to Pharaoh. Just give us seed to sow the earth so we can live and not die. The farmland will not be desolate. So they're the ones who offer themselves in exchange for food and to survive. And so Yosef's only option is to say no and let them die, or yes and accept their offer on behalf of Paro.
Or he can say, it is better for the kingdom that you survive. We are going to, you know, institute a, you know, populist support system here and pay forth the grain that they gathered from the people during those earlier years.
Well,
Like
I would
he can
assume
say,
that
it is better for the kingdom that you don't die too. He doesn't need to demand that they change status in order to give them the grain.
They're the ones who offered themselves. I mean, we know that slavery existed within the Torah, and there was, after 7 years, you had to let a slave go, but a Jewish slave could remain a slave. And there was a method in which they did that. They took an awl through their ear, and they, you know, that was like a method of showing that they would be a slave to their master, and they didn't want to leave the house because for whatever reason they found it to be more comfortable than being out on their own. But that was a choice for the person. And it seems like it's a collective choice that's being made. I understand what you're saying, and that there's a bigger picture here, but the text is pretty
Saying
clear.
die or be a slave is not something I can justify as a choice.
Yeah, I would just say though that you have to put it in cultural context, and since you and I weren't there, right? I mean, that may have been those two choices that were presented to them may have been the only choices that in that community and society were the only choices that people conceived of.
Not only that, but if you study the laws of like the Ebed Ivri, what he was referring to, the Hebrew slave, or the Ebed Kanani even, slavery in the Jewish tradition was a pretty cushy job. I mean, quite frankly, it says that if a master had one pillow, he would be obligated to give it to his Ebed. If he only had one pillow, he has to sleep without a pillow. He has to give it to his slave. The slave has to eat before the master eats, and it has to be the same food. There's all sorts of things in Judaism which mandates the most compassionate and respectful treatment of slaves. So, which I'm not saying slavery is an execrable institution, let me say. Thankfully long dead. I'm not in any way condoning it, advocating it, espousing it, or anything else. I'm simply saying that slavery as it existed in Judaism was light years ahead of the way other cultures treated their slaves.
That may be. Yeah.
In a second, I have to actually go, but I did want to throw in that recently I was reading some conspiracy theory that the crop circles, they were blaming the Jews for the crop circles.
That was me.
But saying that
you too?
That was us.
But saying that it was UFOs and aliens that were building the pyramids, and it's like, no, the pyramids were the Jews.
Yeah, no, right. Yes, that's the thing. I've seen that where like people are like, they blame the Jews for everything, but the one thing that they did, which is build the pyramids, that they ascribed to aliens. Right. Yeah. And I've seen that.
Well, the Egyptian we were the ones building the pyramids because they found, I mean, that was the whole idea, right? Beit Avadim, lead us from the house of bondage. That's what we were doing. We were building the pyramids.
Yeah, but that's not the case if you're a conspiracy theorist. If you're a conspiracy theorist, it was built by aliens.
Oh yeah, I mean, what we go through that. Look, even Irish Jews go through that. They accuse us of building Stonehenge. I mean, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well,
yeah,
I'm getting my space laser charged up in the other room.
But do we know what the cities of Pithom and Ramses were? Do we know what where they were supposed to be? I mean, or were they actually supposed to be the pyramids or another location? Because it says that the Jews were building the cities of Pithom and Ramses. So wherever that location is, that's kind of where things were.
Yeah, that's what we're being built. Yeah, you're right. That is more accurate.
Rather than the pyramids.
Yeah, rather than the pyramids of Giza, which is what everybody thinks of when we say the pyramids.
Yeah.
Right. We Jews may not have built the pyramids at Giza specifically. That's true. And we definitely know that they did not build the ones that were in South America, but they were in the Americas, the Mayans, the Incans. They built their own pyramids. So
I always wonder, why does the Sphinx predates the pyramids by a considerable margin. There's debate in the archaeological community about how much the Sphinx. But I mean, you look at all these ancient structures, whether it's the pyramids or the, Stonehenge or any of these other places, I tend to apply Occam's razor. All things being equal, the simplest explanation tends to be correct. In my opinion, the simplest explanation would be that ancient civilizations had a level of technological expertise we don't give them credit for. We tend to think of them as being primitive, uneducated. We think of them as being in Neanderthals, and even Neanderthals weren't Neanderthals. They had a larger cranial capacity than Homo sapiens. So,
yep, that's right.
Anyways, on that note, I want to wish you all a very, very happy new Gregorian New Year for those who celebrate the Gregorian calendar. And I'll catch you all on the flip side. It's always a pleasure studying with you.
Shalom,
Hello.
Channing. Shalom, Channing.
Yeah. So anyway, I guess I could just say one final thing is that the lesson I learned here from Rav Aaron and Jeremy and the estimable Mr. Channing was that never give up, because you never know what Hashem has in store for you.
That's
Even
it.
if right now it seems like you're in really deep pit.
That's it.
That's right. That's why Miriam carries the tambourine. Things could change at any time.
Keherifying, Yeshua Hashem Keherifying, and the twinkling.
And Yaakov never gave up hope.
That's it.
Yaakov, he was the Yaakov, he was the Akev, not
The
giving
heel.
up hope.
Heel.
And then he became the Israel again once he started coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, you see, you never know. You can start off as a heel and become.
Yeah.
Hope gives you a sneaky heel.
Yeah.
Hope gives you strength. That's for sure.
Well,
and you never know.
happy-
Times will get better.
Hanukkah Sameach to everyone. Chag Sameach.
Hanukkah Sameach.
Tomorrow's the 8th day.
Chag Sameach.
Remember to light the menorah tomorrow for 8 days. It's going to be beautiful. All those candles lit, and a new Gregorian year, and hopefully we can bring light like Yosef did, light into the world. Integrate ourselves. into it.
A little bit of light, the smallest amount of light dispels a great deal of darkness. So, the thing. That's the whole thing with Hanukkah. We didn't have the resources. It's interesting. The Greeks didn't destroy the oil. They didn't just take it away. Okay, fine. There's no oil. They left the oil there. They just broke the seal that the Kohen Gadol had placed on it. That in other words, to render it ritually unfit. So it was like the Greeks were saying, go ahead and keep your Hanukkah. Light your. But you don't have to do it as Reb Aaron was pointing out. Yosef Atzadik was uncompromising. He didn't say, he was able to integrate himself into the culture of his time without it, without it obscuring or without assimilating. Okay, he was able to, without assimilating. And that's what Reb Aaron was pointing out. And that's really the message of Hanukkah. The Greeks were saying, it's great. You can light your menorah, but do it like a Greek. Do it like a nice ritual. Do it like a pretty ceremony. You don't have to do it in rigid adherence to your traditions and laws and the Torah, the way Hashem wants you to do it. But the thing that says they found the Shemen Zayit, it was just enough for one night, and it miraculously burned for 8. So the real issue is showing that, hey, you know what? Even if you think you don't have the adequate resources to be true to yourself, or to maintain your commitment or your connection with Yiddishkeit, if you really just say, you know what, I'm going to work with what Hashem gives me, and trust Him to take care of the rest.
And that's it. Keep Hashem. Keep Hashem in your life. I mean, that was the whole point. They just took the seal off the cruises. That was the whole point of Hanukkah, is you can be Jewish culturally.
Right.
Remove God from, that's what the Assyrian Greeks wanted, was to remove God from the equation. Your culture is beautiful. Continue to do whatever you, Shabbat, everything. Go for it.
And without Hashem, it has no meaning. It's just a meaningless ritual then. And that's what they observed. It's just meaningless rituals that were part of Greek culture. And it has no meaning. It has no substance. It has no mamashas. It's like an Irish tavern that doesn't serve Guinness. It just doesn't work.
All right. With that, should we wish everyone a wonderful evening?
Yes.
Happy celebrations. Happy holidays, everyone. And good night. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Kol tov.
We love you.